Do you want a specific tool to minimize the risk of hallucination when prompting? In this video, I will show you the Hallucination Minimizer, which is a specific GPT that will help you to drastically reduce the risk of generating and using hallucinated outputs. Now, before showing you the actual tool, I will briefly explain what we exactly mean with hallucination, why hallucination is still an issue, even when you're using the most sophisticated large language models. And finally, I also want to show you briefly how we can mitigate the risk of hallucination. Next, I will demonstrate the actual Hallucination Minimizer, and in particular, I will show you how we can use the tool to avoid the creation of hallucinated information when we are creating a market analysis report. So let's get started. Yes, I think everybody already heard about hallucination. So what do we mean with hallucination? We talk about hallucination when, based on a prompt, large language models are creating output that at first sight looks very plausible, but is actually a false statement. And that can be that it's a minor error that it makes, like it gives you a wrong date or a wrong place. But sometimes it can also make completely fake content, like fake policies, or might kind of make up people or companies. And this, of course, can still be a major issue today. And let me briefly explain why actually hallucination, even today, is still an important problem. So there are actually 3 reasons why hallucination can happen when we're using large language models. And the first is that you need to realize that large language models are trained on specific data. And of course, they are trained on a lot of data, but they will always miss certain data. And if they miss data, they might try to kind of cover that gap by inventing information. And that can be a first source of hallucination. The second explanation is that you need to understand that large language models are not something like Wikipedia. Large language models simply are very good in predicting the next word in a sentence. However, they are not trained to give you the most accurate information. They are simply trained to give you the most likely next word in a sentence. And in that way, again, hallucination can happen because not always the most likely next word in a sentence is the most accurate. And finally, and I think that's actually the most important reason that we still see hallucination in a lot of large language models, is that large language models are kind of trained to be an eager assistant. So they really want to help you. So even if they don't really have the information, they will still try to give you something that might be helpful. So they are trained to be very helpful, but this helpfulness can actually trigger hallucination. So these are kind of the 3 core reasons why we still see large language models hallucinating, and especially the last one is still quite problematic. So let me now briefly explain you what are the core strategies that we can apply to deal with these risks. Yes, and the first strategy is to make sure that we provide as much data as possible, which we call in large language model language, we give context. So the more specific context you provide, the lower the risk it will start hallucinating information. So when you prompt, it always makes sense to give as much information as possible upfront. So a second strategy is that we give the prompt explicit guardrails. And that means that we give it kind of rules where we make it explicit that if the large language model does not know the answer, it should not make up an answer. And in that way, we can avoid that it tries to please us. A third strategy is that we force the large language model itself to engage in critical thinking. And this we can do by means of what we call chain of thought prompting. So that means that in our prompt, we will explicitly mention that it should execute steps before giving us the final answer. And an important step we should formulate then is a kind of critical reflection step. And here you see some examples. So this kind of sub-prompts can help us to kind of put the large language model in a mindset where it really becomes a critical thinker. And this will again reduce the risk of hallucination. Finally, the fourth important strategy is that you have to be as specific as possible in your prompt. So the more specific you are, the lower the risk that the large language model will try to fill in the blanks. So the more information you give, the better the output tends to be and the lower the risk of hallucination. So in general, what we need to do is apply these 4 strategies if we want to minimize the risk of hallucination. Now, I realize that this is quite time consuming, and I'm also a lazy person by nature. as we all are to some extent. So what I did now is I created a specific GPT in OpenAI called the Hallucination Minimizer that will actually apply these prompting strategies for you automatically. So let me now illustrate this hallucination minimizer. Yes, so here you see my hallucination minimizer. So this is a GPT that I designed. This is a publicly available GPT, and you can find the link to this GPT in the description below. So now we can just start the GPT by pressing start. And then you will see that it will ask me to give a specific prompt. Yes, so now it's asking me to provide a specific prompt. So now I can say my prompt is as follows, and now I'll give it a specific prompt. And here I actually prepared a prompt to do a market analysis of AI-driven predictive maintenance solutions for mid-sized chemical manufacturers in Europe. Now, actually, this is not a high-quality prompt, yeah, so I didn't ground it with data, I didn't give it guardrails, I didn't do chain-of-thought prompting, and the specificity is quite limited. So this would be a prompt where the risk of hallucination is quite extensive. So let me, first of all, briefly show you what happens if you execute this prompt simply in ChatGPT. Yeah, so here you find a chat where I simply use the ChatGPT 5.2 instant model, and I have provided my prompts. And then indeed, it starts giving me information on market size growth dynamics. But actually, whereas I asked it to provide for Europe, it starts with providing it in US dollars, which already indicates that this is not really very useful information. And then if we scroll down, you will see that when we look at growth numbers, it will give me a lot of numbers here. Yeah, so here it's saying, look, the growth rates generally range from 12% to 27%, but this is not really for the specific segment that I stipulated in my prompt. So now it kind of tries to please me by giving me some numbers, but these numbers are actually not accurate for the specific market segment that I wanted. So using this information would actually be not accurate. Yeah, so here you can see that because my prompt was rather vague, also the output that I get remains vague and is not accurate, and it's not what I want. So let us now go back to the hallucination minimizer to see how we can solve this problem. Yes, so now I'm back in my hallucination minimizer, and so I've now added this initial prompt here in my chatbot. So now I can enter that prompt, and now it will not execute the prompt, but it will try to create for me an optimized prompt that reduces the risk of hallucination. So let us take a look at the output that we're getting here. Yeah, so what do I get now as output? So as a first step, it now kind of analyzes the risks, the hallucination risks of my prompt. And as mentioned before, indeed, it lacks specificity, the time horizon was not defined, instructions are unclear. Yeah? So these are kind of the problems with my prompt. Then it thinks about what could be strategies to minimize the risk of hallucination. Then it applies these strategies to give me already a better prompt. But this is not the final prompt. Then it will try to further optimize that prompt by doing a critical review of the optimized prompt. And here I actually get my final optimized prompt that should minimize the risk of hallucination. So now I can copy paste this prompt, and then we can see whether the output that this prompt would generate is better. Yes, and so now I've copy pasted this prompt again simply in a ChatGPT 5.2 instant model. And let us now take a look at the output. And you see here immediately it makes clear that the geography should be Europe. Yeah? So now it doesn't give me information in US dollars or something like that. It gives some kind of data on mid-sized chemical manufacturers. It has formulated a time frame, and here it starts kind of analyzing market size and growth. And here actually immediately say, look, the data that you want are not available. Yeah? So here actually it immediately tells me, look, actually I cannot find reliable data to give you reliable numbers. So here I actually know, okay, actually ChatGPT cannot really help me. Whereas in the prior version, when I didn't do the hallucination minimization, it started to give me a lot of numbers. So in this way, you see that this actually gives me much more secure information where I am fully aware that the actual data are not available, and then that I can get some proxies, but not the actual data. So I hope this shows that with this hallucination minimizer, you can really reduce the risk of getting fabricated, hallucinated information that you then just take over. With this hallucination minimizer, it will actually make you very aware about what are accurate data and what are made-up data or adjacent data. So I hope this hallucination minimizer can help you to avoid the risk of hallucination. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and hopefully I will see you in another video. Thanks, bye.